Well, hello folks and friends and fellow students and colleagues and all those of you who are around the world have enjoyed what has been happening this past year on the internet, especially after what happened exactly a year ago today. A year ago today, June 8th, 2020. 365 days ago, that infamous interview between Muhammad Hijab and Yasir Qadhi. Most of you probably know what I'm talking about. Some of you this may be new to you. But if you were to go up on any of our YouTube sites, myself or David Woods or Hatun Tash or Al Fadi's site or Islamic Critique, you will see that every one of us grabbed that interview as soon as it happened. I put up a video within a day responding to it. It's still up there. Certainly others around the world wanted to find out what had happened in that interview, because it was probably the first time any of you had heard this kind of material that was being discussed in public. Now, to understand what happened in that interview, and because we want to unpack it now, a year on, want to show that it's still as relevant a year later as it was back in 2020 when they came up with this real problem concerning the preservation of the Quran. Let's back up. Let's back up. What do we know? Everybody has been told. You have been told. I have been told. Every Muslim has been told that there is only one Quran. And this is it. This Quran. The Hafs Quran. This is the Quran, they say, that is eternal. This we know because of chapter 85, verse 22. This is also the Quran that has never changed, is unable to be changed because God himself protects it from being changed. Chapter 15, verse 9. Chapter 10, verse 15, chapter 18, verse 27 says that no man can change. And of course, Yasir Qadhi and others have said not one word, not one letter. It cannot change, not one word, not one letter. Because if that were to happen, then of course it no longer is eternal. It no longer can be guarded. That means God has not guarded it very well. So when you have these verses in the Quran, 10 verse 15, 15 verse 9, 18 verse 27, you can then understand why this is what has been the narrative. This is all you have ever heard. And Yasir Qadhi and many others, Shabir Ali and many other of the pundits have always said not one word, not one letter has been changed. Otherwise, if one word or one letter could be changed, it's no longer eternal. It now is being it has been corrected by men, changed by men, and man cannot have any part in God's word. So this interview was fascinating because this interview came about because of a dilemma that Muhammad Hijab, who is he? Many of you should know who he is by now. He's all over the internet. He has a large YouTube following, has been. He would come down to Speaker's Corner when I was there. He still goes down every Sunday. I have had interactions with him for many years. He and I had a infamous debate about quite a few years ago where we were debating the Quran, this very subject. And a number of years ago, 5 years ago, 2016, Hatun and I went down to the corner. So that was 5 years ago. We went down to the corner in June of 2016 and we held up 26 Qurans. Let's just put that and review what we're talking about. Here it is.
There is only one Quran, right? And that every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie!
You run away from truth!
Okay, so there are two Qurans today, right? Two.
More than two Qurans.
More than two? Three Qurans?
More than three Qurans.
More than three? Four Qurans?
There are approximately 26 of the Qurans.
26 different Qurans! The prophets fought, but by the time you get to the war, they were killed. That is a huge
Attention. Don't give up.
Your faces! Muslim people! Your face from here! Come!
You Muslims, you better go. We're going to make it more and more difficult for you.
Now, you see what happened? The response we got from the Muslims, but did you notice who was right there in the crowd? Do you notice who was there? That was Muhammad Hijab. Did you see him step away and start calling people to come to him? Come here, don't watch what they're showing you. Don't listen to what they were saying. Did you see that? Did you pick that up? Here's some pictures of him. You can see he did not want the other Muslims to listen to us and to look at what we were showing. 26 different Qurans. 26 different qira'ats. Now, whether or not Muhammad Hijab knew about these qira'ats or not, I don't know. I've not talked to him, but it was obvious that he didn't want anybody to see this. It was obvious that he didn't want people to hear what we were saying as we were looking at many of the differences, one after another. So 4 years later, 2020, June 2020, he had this infamous interview. And let's go ahead and play bits of it. Now, the interview went on for an hour and 45 minutes. Really, it's the last 28 minutes that's the most damaging. And it's those, I don't want to play all 28 minutes. You can go up online and you can see it on our sites. I have it there back a year ago. I just want to play the snippets. I want to take out snippets, the major parts of each one. I'll go them in sequence. I want to take out little bits, about 30 seconds here, about a minute here, to unpack exactly what the problem was. Why Yasir Qadhi did not want to talk about this in public. So let's play the first segment.
Okay, now on this point, I just wanted to go to another thing, which is probably the most, when I put on the community page, the most asked thing, which is there was a video that was released by one of our brothers some time ago, Brother Imran, and he released this big video about the leaks of some kind of email chat that you were involved in about preservation of Quran, okay? And what is your position in relation to preservation of Quran? Is, for example, Hafs an Asim, riwayat Hafs an Asim, do you see it as preserved, munazzal from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or do you not see that as munazzal? What's your position?
Jayid. Okay, so first and foremost, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna nahnu nazzal dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. So we believe, as a matter of theology, as a matter of aqeedah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved the Quran, no question about it. Now, as for the issue itself, every single student of knowledge knows, who studies ulum al-Quran, that the most difficult topics are ahruf and qira'at, and the concept of ahruf and the reality of ahruf, and the relationship of the Uthmanic Mus'haf with the ahruf, and the preservation of the ahruf. Is it 1, is it 3, is it 7, and the relationship of the qira'at to the ahruf.
So the Hafs an Asim, what does that mean? Well, to understand that, you need probably something like this. This is, and I'll put it up on the screen here. This is from Wikipedia. I didn't make this up. Any of you can get it from Wikipedia, and it is very simple. It's really the 30 qira'ats. There they all are. The 30 qira'ats. The part in green are the 7 that Yasir Qadhi just talked about. The 3 down here are the 3 that he talked about, the 3 in red. So 7 plus 3 makes 10. So these are 7 different readings, and they are known as the Nafi from Medina, Ibn Kathir from Mecca. We have Abu Amr from Basra, Ibn Amir from Damascus, Asim from Kufa, Hamza from Kufa, Al-Qisai from Kufa. Kufa, quite a few from Kufa. And there's the Asim. When he says Hafs an Asim, he's saying Hafs, this guy who is in the family of Asim. He comes from this stable. He comes from this group. This is one of the 7, the first 7 that were chosen by Ibn Mujahid in 936. Look at the dates. The dates are very important here. The dates are very important. Because these guys here, all of these guys here, these first 7, notice the dates that they were actually the dates they died. Nafi in 785, Ibn Kathir in 738. By the way, this is not the Ibn Kathir of the tafsir. This is the Ibn Kathir of the qira'ats. These are the qira'ats, the readings we're talking about. Abu Amr of 770, Ibn Amir of 736. He is the earliest. 736. 736 is the 8th century. This is not the 7th century. So none of these guys are from the century Muhammad lived or died None of these guys knew Muhammad, so they were not there when the Quran was being revealed, if the Quran had been revealed. That's why the dates are so important. Asim, 745, Hamza, 772, Al-Qasai would be 805. But they were chosen in 936, in the 10th century. So that's, this is the 8th century. In the 9th century, it's not to the 10th century that they're chosen. So you can see that's a dilemma, and you can see why hijab had a problem here, and why Yasir Qadhi says very clearly, whether it's one, what is he talking about? Well, that's the very first one. That's the one that was chosen by Uthman there in 652. And it's the one that has now been rechosen again in 1924, 97 years ago, by Muhammad ibn Husayni al-Haddad there in Cairo at the Al-Azhar University, just 97 years ago, not even a century ago. That is not on here. That is this one right here that he chose. So whether it's one or three, these three were chosen by good old Jazari in 1429. This is the 15th century. This is 800 years after Muhammad. These three are chosen to go along with these 7 to make the 10. Those are the 10 qira'ats. Those are the creme de la creme. They're the best of the best, as Yasir Qadhi used to always say. I'm sure, I don't know if he's still saying it anymore, because not any of those 10, not any of those 7 plus 3 makes 10, not any of those green and red ones are the same. Every one of them is different. But hold on a minute. You look at the 7, you look at the 3. What's missing? What's missing? This is missing. The one that was chosen, the one that is the canonical text, the one that was chosen in 1924, then there were variations of it. It had to be then rechosen again for Egypt in 1936, and then it had to be chosen by King Fahd for all the world in 1985, 36 years ago. 36 years ago, this became the official text for the whole world. That means in my lifetime, and possibly in many of your lifetime. But that's not in this list. No wonder Yasir Qadhi didn't want to talk about this. No wonder he said, do not talk about this. We don't talk about this in public. You're going to see that. That's going to come up. So hold on a minute. So where did this guy come from? Well, he comes from this list over here. A whole nother 14 others. 14 others. 2 for each one of these readers. So 2 times 7 equals 14. That were chosen by this guy, Al-Shatibi. Al-Shatibi, he chose these in 1194. That's the late 12th century. That's 600 years after Muhammad. Oh, dear, 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 dear. Can you see why this is such a problem for Muslims? Because none of these, the 7 plus the 14 plus the 3, then the other 6 that also Jazari chose for these 3 as the riwayats. These are the transmitters of the readers, but are they the same? No, they're not. Not one of these is the same. Let me just show you them. Here they are right up here. There they are, folks. There they are. I've just got 9 of them that I've got listed there. Just the 9 that I bothered to get. But folks, can you see? Not one of them is the same. Take a look at these 2 right here. These 2 are the most popular. This one is the Warsh, which is very popular in North Africa. This is the Hafs, that is the most popular around the world. About 95% of the world's population now memorizes the Quran using this text. About 3% of the Muslims around the world memorize the Quran using this text. If you memorize it with this text, you better be careful, because this text has 5,000 different words. And then you can see why it is important which book you memorize, why these are still being printed, why you can still buy them on the internet. Because depending on where you live in the world, if you memorize in North Africa, you better memorize the Quran by this Warsh viewpoint, or if you are in the rest of the world, you better memorize it by the Hafs. But there are actually 30 of these. 30 of these. I just have 9 here. There are 30 of these different Qurans. Every one of them is different. Every one of them is different. So, let's look and see what happens next. Let's watch the next part.
This is a topic that when you're the beginning student of knowledge, you're like, what is all of this going on here? When you go a little bit more, you learn to simply memorize what your teachers say and regurgitate it out. And you don't fully comprehend. When you do a deep dive is when things get very, very awkward and difficult. And this isn't new. This is from the time of the Sahaba. And this is not a joke, brothers and sisters. the issue of ahruf and qira'at caused confusion to somebody whom the Prophet ﷺ said, if you want to listen to the Quran directly, listen to Ubay. Ubay is not some even average Sahabi. He is the Qari of the Quran. He is the master. He is who he is. And he goes, فَدَخَلْ فِي نَفْسِي شَكْ. What is all of this stuff? Again, this is you're asking some very honest questions. It's the first time I'm saying these things. Many people are aware who listen to my lectures that I've mentioned the crises that happened to me at Yale. My first year at Yale. It wasn't a crisis of faith, by the way. So I was very clear about this. People misinterpret it. It was a crisis of my understanding of knowledge. It was a crisis of what my teachers taught me. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, as somebody who memorized the Quran as a teenager, alhamdulillah, in my entire life, I have never doubted that the Quran is divine. You cannot doubt that. And you listen to it, you recite it, you just cannot doubt that. It's never been an issue. This one.
So here you are. You can see I've been taking notes as we go along, and he's talking about beginners, and he puts it into three categories. Beginners, we don't actually talk about this. We don't mention this. We don't want them to get confused. Those who are intermediate, we start to introduce, but we just ask them to believe, just to have it by faith. And then the more mature students, those who've been for a longer time, we do a deep dive. Here's a picture of the deep dive that he does. What is the deep dive? Well, this is not a joke, as he said. This is not a joke. Even the Sahaba, they didn't know what to do with it. Who are the Sahaba? They're the ones that are the companions of the Prophet. He mentions Ubay ibn Ka'b way up in the Damascus. Isn't that interesting? Ubay ibn Ka'b way up in Damascus, that he had, and if you look at his, he has many more surahs. He has 116 surahs, but there's only supposed to be 114. So he has more surahs than are in the Quran that is today. So obviously he's talking about a different Quran there. Odd that he would bring him up as an example. And then he talked about his crisis at Yale University back in the 1990s. 1995, I think, is when he graduated with a PhD. And there, when he was at Yale, he was very clear that this was not a crisis of faith. It was a crisis of knowledge. Well, hold on a minute. Does not one lead to the other? If you have a crisis of knowledge, then that brings about a crisis of faith. If you don't know how to answer the questions, then what do? Well, you have a crisis. And that's why Muhammad Hijab had come to him, because he had a crisis when he saw all those Qurans down Speaker's Corner. Now, I'm not going to take credit for that, or not to, and we're not going to take credit for that. What we are going to say is, it's obvious that since 2016, Muhammad Hijab wanted an answer. He wanted an answer, and that's why he's asking Yasir Qadhi a year ago, what about this? Is this the crisis you had? And then he started going and says, no, I am absolutely sure that the Quran is the Word of God. I'm absolutely sure that it is preserved. I'm absolutely sure that Allah has preserved it. He just went into this mantra, almost like he was trying to persuade himself. Did you get that impression? I got that impression. So let's go on. Let's see what he says next. All right.
This was the issue. That the issue of ahruf and preservation and qira'at and relationships between them, these are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. These issues should only be discussed amongst people who know what the qira'at are and who understand some of these questions that are being raised. Traditional understandings of ahruf and qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked by our people outside of, by our academics, by their academics outside of the faith tradition. You see, in a Muslim environment, there's always some respect that we have for the Quran. We should. In a Muslim environment, we'll press a little bit and then we'll say, okay, khalas, sami'na wa ata'na. And that's great, alhamdulillah. When you go to academia, they don't have that red line. And they're going to just, the famous story of the emperor with no clothes. They're going to just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly, that you know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing anything new. They'll bring you riwayat, and they'll bring you athar, and then you add to that very well-known issues of, I don't even want to be explicit. And then you bring on top of that makhtutat, and then. And it's very clear to you and to every single very advanced student and specialist that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions.
Well, folks, that is the signature piece of the entire interview. And that last statement, the standard narrative. What is the standard narrative? The standard Islamic narrative, S-I-N, standard Islamic narrative is what he's talking about. Some people call it the Islamic traditions. Some people call it the tafsir, the tahriq, the hadith, or the sirah, or even the Quran itself. The standard narrative that Muslims have been putting out there for 1400 years, that standard narrative has holes in it. And that now has become the statement of the year, the statement of the decade, the statement of the century, because Yasir Qadhi probably rused the day that he actually said that. That is exactly what we've been waiting to hear. See, Muslims never, ever admit that there's a problem with the Quran. They have never, as many years, almost 40 years that I've been working with Muslims, I've never heard a Muslim say what he just said. Not a true Muslim. Oh, I've heard people who have left Islam who've said that. But Muslims of his stature, went to Yale University, guy has a PhD, considered to be one of the most respectable of Muslims, as he was at the time that he had this interview. Since the interview, of course, he has been thrown under the bus by many of his co-religionists, but at this time he was considered to be the best and the best, and I was fascinated to hear a man of his stature, with his ability, with his learning, and with his experience, say the standard narrative, S-I-N, the standard Islamic narrative has holes in it. And he admitted that even the advanced scholars cannot solve the problem of the ahruf and the qiraat. The ahruf and the qiraat, even the words themselves, they're not sure which is which. They're not even sure how to define them. All they know that these are the readings. But which readings are they? Are they the original 7 that supposedly Muhammad received when he was still alive? Because that's not these 7, because these 7 don't even begin to appear till the 8th century. These were never around when Muhammad was living. So what are these readings that he... Is that the ahruf? I've heard him say that many times. That's the ahruf, those 7. But hold on a minute, what 7? Are these dialects? Well, if these are dialects, then they're from up north, and he never went up north. So how would he even know these dialects? How would he even be able to give them out? How would he even be able to recite them? He wouldn't know what the dialects were. Obviously, that's a problem that they haven't even dealt with. No wonder the scholars don't know what to do with this. As far as qiraat, well, these are the qiraat. These 10 right here are the qiraat, but these are all 8th, 9th, going all the way up into 844, the late. So they're 736 up until 844. So that's the early 8th century going up to the mid 9th century. That's 100 years gap. From Muhammad, 200 years gap, and also within 100 years of itself. So you can see, this is another huge problem. No wonder he has to say that the scholars don't know how to deal with this. I wouldn't know how to do this. I was a Muslim. I would have no idea how to respond to hijab's crisis. This is a real crisis. Now, did you notice he talked about this respect that Muslims have for the Quran? And that's true everywhere you go. They don't put it on the ground. They make sure they always keep it levitated. They do not want us to touch it with unsullied hands, or even because we're a Christian, they say some of us should not touch it because that would make it dirty. They have a huge respect for this, and he talks about that. But he's not talking about the physical Quran. He's talking about asking certain questions of the Quran. And he's saying we only go so far. We don't go any further than that. But when he was at Yale University, they didn't have any red lines. You notice he put the word red lines there? Here, you can see. Take a look at this. That's the red lines. You're not permitted to go beyond if you're a Muslim. His dilemma was he lives in America. He grew up in Houston. He is from a Pakistani background, but he grew up in Houston. He has an American accent, and he went to Yale University to get his doctorate on the Quran, and there are no red lines, and they can ask any question they want, and that is true. In order to go to here in the West, folks, if you're going to come to the West, there are no red lines here. We can ask any question we want. Why do you think the internet and YouTube was created here in America? It could never have been created in a Muslim world. Because Muslims have red line after red line beyond which they cannot go. They have red lines for everything. There are so many questions that you can't ask if you're a Muslim. And he knows this. And he was admitting it. Finally, a Muslim of his stature admitting this. And then he's going to go on and he's going to talk about this even more. He calls it a respect for the Quran. I would say the more the Quran can take, the more questions you can ask of it, and the more answers it can give back to you. That's what gains respect. The Quran has to earn my respect. The Quran has to earn your respect. You don't just give the Quran respect out of allegiance. It has to pass the critical test. It has to pass the historical test. It has to pass the textual test. And that is something the Quran has never done. So what he's really saying is, we give it respect. No, you don't give it respect. You just don't let people ask these questions. Remember what he said earlier? Those who are beginners, we don't even talk about it. Those who are intermediary, we just say just believe. And those who are more advanced, do a deep dive. I would love to know what his deep dive is. If he does a deep dive and this question is asked, what is his answer for them for this question? You're going to see the question is going to come up. The question has not yet been asked by Muhammad Hijab. That's yet to come. Hold on. Let's continue.
These are now well known within the Western Academy that they're bringing forth issues. Their level of now knowledge is leaps and bounds above what it used to be, 100 years ago, And by and large, our ulama in the Eastern world are not aware, by and large, of what's going on in the Western side of things. And they're not answering those questions in a manner that it needs to be answered. And this is something all of us that are in academia fully acknowledge. This issue of ahruf and qira'at has troubled the ummah from the very beginning of times, nothing new. And there are 15 opinions about this. None of them fully answer all of the questions that are raised. So the issues of the relationship, of the origins, of the ikhtilaf and all of this should only be discussed amongst those who are familiar with this science. It takes a while. I can't answer this question in a 20-minute interview, nor is it wise to do so, which is why I never brought this topic up myself. You will not find one lecture of mine about this issue. It should never be brought up in public. And I don't like these idiots, and they are idiots, wallahi. This is not something you discuss amongst the masses, ya akhi. It's not wise. You don't understand qira'at, let it be. It's wise. That's why I never did it. It's the Western academics. These problems are now becoming mainstream. Twitter has so many accounts of Quran experts, and they're non-Muslims, and they're just saying things. There are books written. Brill released a book by Shadi Nasir. Again, read that book as well. So for those that are interested in stuff, and you'll understand that, hey, we need ulama who believe in the Quran to defend the Quran.
Whew. That's a mouthful what he said there. I hope you all picked up. Can you see he's in a corner? There is a dilemma going on here, and I can understand his difficulty. He doesn't know what to do with this. And he's admitted very clearly that in the last 100 years, we in the West, and he's talking about Houston, and he's also talking about Yale and all the rest of us, we have come leaps and bounds, and that's true. We have come leaps and bounds, because now we can actually get the qira'ats. We can actually read them. We can actually start deciphering them. What do you think? How is it we know about the Hafs and the Warsh? We were the ones, our team that's there in Australia, they were the ones that found the 5,000 differences. Has any Muslim done this? No, we're even way ahead of the Muslims. We've gone leaps and bounds even beyond them. We've bound right over them. That's why we know so much more about this. Hatun's team there in Britain, she's looked at 23. Her team has looked at 23 of these qira'ats. She now has 37 of them, even more than the 30 that are official. She found she has another 7 that are different derivations of Hafs. And just by looking at 23 of them, they have found 93,000 differences. How many Muslims know that? How many Muslims have even looked into that? How many Muslims have even tried to unpack that? Can you understand then why no Muslim scholar wants to talk about this? They don't want to talk about this in the topic. They don't. And he said very clearly, I've never lectured. He's almost proud of this. I've never lectured on this topic. Well, should he? Maybe he should. Because this is the topic that's been around for 1,000 years. And if you're talking about 736 up to 844, then it has been a good 1,000 years. We're now in 2021. Yes, he is correct. It has been around for 1,000 years, and the Muslim scholars have still not come up with a solution. And he hasn't come up with a solution. That's why he's never lectured on it. If he's never lectured on it, then what is he asking people to take his class to take a deep dive? What is he going to lecture? Would you take his class if he made a statement like that? If he can't even answer Muhammad Hijab's question, and hold on a minute, Muhammad Hijab, hasn't even asked the question yet. That's got to come in the next segment. That's to come in the next segment, the last segment. But can you see, this is a dilemma for Muslims all over the world. This should never be brought up in public. Do not ask me this question. We don't talk about this. Not in public. Not in front of a camera. He got really upset for Muhammad Hijab even having the camera there. Talk to me afterwards. take my class, do anything, but let's not talk about it now in public. Why? Because we have a respect, we have a red line. This is a red line you do not cross. You do not cross this red line, Muhammad Hijab, and every other Muslim listening. Why? Because the standard narrative has holes in it. Let's watch the last segment and let's see what he has to say.
Let me ask you one question to try and make this as specific as possible. I think if I were to give you a blank mushaf, yeah, and tell you to write what is munazzal verbatim from Allah into that mushaf with no human interference, would you write something which corresponds?
It's not an easy answer. It's not an easy yes or no. It is enough for the Muslim to believe that the
I think
Quran
this should
is
be an easy yes or no, though. Yes, Qadhi. I have to.
Okay, very, very well. So, yeah, Muhammad, after we get off this phone call, me and you, let's have a number of discussions. No problem. I'm very open with advanced students. But these issues should not... Look, it is Kalamullah, what is going to be written. It is Kalamullah. It is
what would you write?
You're pushing me. And I'm saying it's not hikmah to... Listen, I have a condition. Like I said, everything I say is going to be factual. The Quran is the uncreated speech of Allah. The Quran is preserved. The Quran is known. The Quran is mutawatir. And alhamdulillah, all of the qira'at are the Quran. All of the qira'at are authentic. Alhamdulillah. Leave it at that, ya akhi. Beyond this, honestly, I have no problem. We'll have discussions or take my class. But beyond this requires background information. It is enough for the Muslim to know that the Quran is the speech of Allah that has been protected, and what we recite is the kalam of Allah. That is enough for the Muslims. 20, 21, so it's been 25 years, 26 years that I have been thinking about the ahruf and qira'at, especially over the last 10 years. I have been doing a deep dive into this issue, going back to the original sources, consulting experts. And I have a workable theory. Inshallah ta'ala, when the time is right, I will publish books and papers on this.
Yeah, but then if I could push back here just a little bit, I know this is, I don't want to make it uncomfortable, but it's just to make things clearer. Like if someone gave you a Quran which is empty in terms of there's nothing on it, and gave you a pen, obviously you have the Quran, but the question is, would what you write in that mushaf correspond with any? I'm not saying it's a mutawatir. I'm saying would it be sahih, authentic? Would it correspond with anything that we have in terms of the riwayat and the qira'at?
Who's going to bring a new Quran? A'udhu billah. We're going to have the Quran there, but which qira'ah will it be in? It'll be probably a mixture, right? It's not going to be necessarily... Fine. Yeah, okay, so let's leave it at that then. It's not going to be the exact Hafs and Asim bi riwayati fulan or Shu'ba. This is something that is coming at a later stage, okay? The codification of the qira'at is coming in the 2nd, 3rd century of the Hijrah.
But you would have something which you could say is sahih.
Fully recognizable by the average Muslim, obviously. Anything bizarre, strange.
So when you write, so just to be clear, if you write down, it might not be a standard Hafs and Asim.
Exactly, yes.
But what you write down is recognizable, and you believe that everything within that is munazzal min Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
100% as Allah is my witness. 100%. That is the belief.
Yes.
Oh dear. Well, you can see, not once but twice, Muhammad Hijab asked the question. And what is the question? What's the burning question that he's been waiting to ask? And what's the question that he really wanted Yasir Qadhi to answer? A blank piece of paper. What are you going to write? Which Quran will it be? Which Qira'at or Riwayat? Qira'at are the readers, Riwayat are the transmitters. Qira'at are the 10, Riwayat are the other 20. So Qira'at 10, Riwayat 20, to get them together, 30. See, these are both Riwayats and Qira'ats. I have 9. 4 of them are Qira'ats. The other 5 are Riwayats. So which one of these is the one that was revealed to Muhammad? Which one of these, if you might say, well, there's 30, I only have 9 here. Which one of these, he's saying, is the one that's in heaven? The eternal one. The one that cannot be changed. The one that God is protecting. The one that is preserved. Which one is it? That's all I'm asking you. A simple question. That's all he's asking you. And what was his answer? Did you get the answer? He finally did it. After 28 minutes of waiting for him to answer, he finally says, they are all the Quran. All of them the Quran. Every one of them is the Quran. And it's not going to be just Hafs. Did you get that? It won't be Hafs and Asim. He said very clearly, it won't be Hafs and Asim. Hafs and Asim. Hafs from Asim. Hafs who comes in the stable of Asim. In fact, those two are not even the same Israel. It won't be that one. It will probably be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a spoonful of here and another spoonful of there. You just mix it up and what you get is the Quran. But can I produce it for you today? No. All he can produce are the different qira'ats and the different riwayats with 93,000 differences between them. Boy, oh boy, do they have holes in it. No wonder this was so explosive. No wonder what happened a year ago on this day. I didn't ruin the careers of either Hijab or Yasir Qadhi. It did a huge dent to their careers, and you can then see why Yasir Qadhi and Muhammad Hijab, within a few weeks, they stopped all the comments on both their sites because the entire interview went up on both Yasir Qadhi's site and also on Muhammad Hijab's site. And within 2 weeks, because so many Muslims were screaming and yelling and hollering and saying, I'm leaving Islam because of you, and my blood is going to be on your shoulders because of what you said in that interview, they had to shut down all the comments. Within 2 months, by August, both Muhammad Hijab and Yasir Qadhi had deleted that entire interview from their site. You won't see it on their sites anymore. It's gone. It's gone. By August, they had to delete it completely because this was so damaging to them, to their careers, to Islam, and especially to the Quran. They should never have had that interview, I guess. And yet that was probably the most honest interview I've heard yet. That's the first time I've seen a scholar who admits that there is a real problem, that this is probably the most difficult problem for Muslim scholars in the last 1,000 years. And that, as he said over and over again, I have been strenuously, for the last 25 years, I have been working on just this issue, but he still doesn't have an answer. He couldn't even answer Muhammad Hijab. Which one of those 30 Qurans, which one of even these two, the two top ones, the Hafs and the Warsh, which one of them is the one that he's going to write on this hand? He pretty much admitted they're all going to be part of the Quran. All 93,000 differences? Remember, it's Yasir Qadhi that has been saying for years and years, there's not one word, not one letter different. Not one word, not one letter different in any of the Qurans. All the Qurans are exactly the same. And he has to say that because the Quran says that. It's the Quran that says that it is eternal. Chapter 85, verse 22. It's the Quran that says that God will protect it from not any change. No change can happen because God, Allah, will protect it. Chapter 15, verse 9. It's the Quran that says clearly in chapter 10, verse 15, and chapter 18, verse 27, that no one, no man, no one like you or me, anybody can change it. And of course, change what? Can change one word or one letter. And here, Muhammad Hijab is saying, which one are you going to write then? Because we have 30 different Qurans. I've just got 9 here. We have 30 of them. Which one of those 30 is the one that's in heaven? Which one of those 30 is the one that was sent down to Muhammad? Which one of those 30 was then finally created and written there by Uthman in 652? And remember, when Uthman did that, he had to do that because there were so many other Qurans. They were coming to blows way up there in Azerbaijan because those other Muslims that were from Iraq and from Syria were reciting it differently than those from Medina. And they came to blows because they realized they were coming to different Qurans. And that's why you had to have Uthman then had Zayd ibn Thabit rewrite the Quran in 652. It had already been written in 632, according to the traditions, according to Al-Bukhari, volume 6, hadith number 509 and hadith number 510. Already been written in 632, 20 years earlier. That's why Uthman had to have it rewritten again. And once it was rewritten in the Qurayshi dialect. So Qurayshi dialect, by definition, requires dots and vowels. You have to have dots and vowels. There were no dots and vowels in the 7th century. They only got introduced in the 8th century when the qira'ats. And that's why the qira'ats were formed. What do you think created the qira'ats? The qira'ats were formed from 736 onwards because of the dots and vowels. Once you have dots, once you have vowels, then you have different ways you can put them here. There's 5 different dots, 3 above the letters and 2 below. And so it could be either a na, a ta, a tha, or a ba, or a ya, depending on which dot you put on above and below the lines. And if you put it in 5 different letters, you have 5 different words. And if with 5 different words, then you get the vowels, the vowelizations, the dama, the kasra, and the fatha. The dama is the u sound, the kasra is the e sound, the fatha is the a sound. Once you put those vowels in place, you have all kinds of combinations. And remember that all Arabic words always have 3 letters as their base, as their root. Once you start putting the dots and vowels around them, and those 3 letters, they start to increase. You can have as many, for just 3 letters together, you can have as many as 19 to as many as 33 different words. Can you then understand why all the kiddas started forming? Because of the dots and vowels. Because of the dots and vowels. But these did not exist at the time of Uthman. So what in the world are they talking about when they're hearing different recitations? If those are dialectical recitations, if they are recitations that are dialectical differences, those dialectical differences don't exist in a written text that early, because you can only have dialectical differences with the dots and vowels, which didn't exist in the 7th century. So when he came down and Uthman had this Qurayshi dialect written, or this Qurayshi Quran written, and he burned all the others, what did he burn? What were the others? What was so different about them? Why is it that they had a different script? Unless, of course, they were different Qurans. Unless, of course, this event never really even happened. Can you then understand why? The more we scratch, the more we find. The more we find, the more we shine. The more we shine, the more they whine. Oh, how sublime. No wonder Yasir Qadhi says, do not ask me this question in public. Please don't ask me this question in public, because the standard Islamic narrative, SIN, has holes all through it. Including all these holes that we've just talked about today. This interview showed an awful lot of those holes. And the biggest hole of all was his answer, his response. They're all the Quran. All of them Quran. All the differences make the Quran. No longer can Muslims now say, because of that interview a year ago, June 8th, 2020, no longer can Muslims now say there is one Quran. No longer can they say that it has been preserved. No longer can they say that the Quran they have in their hand today is the Quran that's in heaven. The Quran they have in their hand today is the one that was sent to a man named Muhammad. Or the Quran they have today is the one that Uthman finally compiled and sent to 5 different cities. And look at those 5 cities. Folks, take a look at those 5 cities. Mecca, Medina, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. 3 of them are up in the north. The 2 that are they're in the south. The 2 that are in Medina and Mecca, that's in the Hijaz. That is not the Quran that we have in our hand today. That is not the official Quran. This does not come from the Hijaz. This comes from Kufa in Iraq. This is one of those that they destroyed. This is one of those that he burned. Supposedly, if this one existed. But this didn't exist. This was written. When was this written? Let's look back and see. It was written in 796, the late 8th century, almost the 9th century. This is written 144 years after Muhammad. This could not have been one of those that they burnt. Yet this is now the official text, created 144 years after Muhammad. Oh dear. Created 124 years after Uthman. No wonder there's so many holes. Now here's the other question. Of the 30 that are here, and I have 9 here, of the 30 that exist, 22 of them are from the north. That means they're not from Mecca and Medina. So the vast majority of them are from the north, from Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. And of those 22, 12 of them are from one town alone. It was just a town. It was not a city at that time. It was a small town called Kufa in Iraq, just southwest of what is today called Baghdad. If Muslims want to believe that these are different dialects, how can you have 7 different dialects in a small town? Help me, Muslims. Have you ever thought this through, how stupid that sounds? Dialects takes hundreds of years to form, not just 100 years. Or in this case, goodness sakes, we're talking about those dialects forming within 100 to 200 years in just one town. 12 different dialects, 12 different qira'ats and riwayats from just one small little town? Can you then understand why almost everything we now know about the standard Islamic narrative is full of holes, and why this whole story about how Uthman put it together is absolutely fraudulent. No wonder Yasir Qadhi did not know how to answer. No wonder he said, do not ask me this question. No wonder after 25 years of trying to come up with a solution, he couldn't even come up in 28 minutes of telling a simple solution to Muhammad hijab. No wonder they've had to take that interview off the internet. No wonder Yasir Qadhi got so angry on November 26th of 2020 and put up a 51-minute video attacking me, attacking David Wood, and attacking Dan Brubaker. I can understand why he has anger with me and David Wood, because we've been confronting the Qiraat for the last year. We are the ones who are at the forefront of confronting the Qiraat and the standard narrative and the holes that are in it. But Dan Brubaker? Why Dan Brubaker? Why in the world did he confront Dan Brubaker? What's he doing? Because he's not part of the Qiraat argument. He's not said a thing. He's not said dillish one. This is not his research. The reason he had to confront Dan Brubaker is because what Dan Brubaker has found. Because Dan Brubaker actually goes back to the earlier manuscripts, not the Qiraat. These are much more damaging, and we have yet to talk about that. And that's another whole set of holes that the standard Islamic narratives cannot fill. Well, this has been fun. It's been a whole year. It's good to celebrate it. We'll probably do this every year. Just remind you all of exactly why this is so damaging to the Quran. Because this shuts down any notion that there is an eternal Quran. This shuts down any notion that there was anything sent to Muhammad. This shuts down any notion that there was anything compiled by Uthman. And it shuts down any notion that there was any Quran at all that existed in the 7th century. All the Qurans that we have, including these Qiraat, start to appear in the 8th century and go up until the 9th century, up until 844, are not chosen until 936. The first 7 are chosen then by Ibn Mujahid. And then you have the 14 that come after that. That's chosen by Al-Shatibi in 1194, and then you have the next 6, which are 3 of the Qiraats and 6 of the Riwayats, which are chosen by Al-Jazari or Jazari in 1429. In 1429, 800 years too late. Can you then understand why this was such a problem in Cairo in 1924, when the high school tests, they could not standardize the tests because they were getting 30 different answers from 30 different Qurans for their standardized tests, and that's why they had to go to Muhammad al-Husaini al-Haddad to actually choose just one. And they took the other 29 and threw them into the Nile. They threw them into the Nile. Oh, they didn't throw all the Qurans in the world, just those who belonged to the high school students there in Cairo, thinking that that would solve the problem. They thought they solved the problem 1924, 97 years ago. No, they didn't solve the problem. It still exists today. No wonder Yasir Qadhi can't answer it. And he says, take a deep dive, but he doesn't ever talk about it. He's done not one lecture on it, because there is no solution to this problem. And this is a problem of their own making. And I thank God that we don't have this problem. Listen, this has been fun. It's been a year on. We'll see you in another year. We'll unpack it even more. God bless you. This is Jay. Over and out.